This is episode 5 of Workshop in Progress. This will be the final episode. I attended and presented at MacStock this past weekend, and what I want to do here with the final episode is to basically reflect on the presentation, reflect on the experience, because I believe that is an essential part of any type of learning experience design, anything that you're doing where you're creating, honestly, but specifically with learning, is you have a plan, you have a thought going into it, you design something that you think is going to achieve a goal, and it's important to ask yourself honestly if you did that. And if you can get feedback from the learners, that's super helpful as well. And, I think in that reflective, iterative process, I think, is what really helps you grow. And if you're not doing that, honestly, why do the thing in the first place, I guess. So I figured I would do that here, just to share those final thoughts and to tell you a little bit about the conference if you've never been there either. So let's go ahead and get started then, with that out of the way. So the first thing is that I had a lot of fun. MacStock is for those of you who don't know, is a Mac enthusiast community and a conference. It happens once a year. This was the 9th year of doing it, and it's in the suburbs of Chicago, a little bit northwest of Chicago, in a little town called Crystal Lake, and it's normally a 2-day experience, but this year they expanded it to 3. I was there about midday Friday and for the rest of the weekend, and it was a lot of fun. It was about, I didn't do like an official head count, and the numbers changed from day to day as some people maybe left early or arrived late, but I would say there were 60-ish people there, and it was, and this is going to go into what I think about my training and my learning experience that I created, but it was also, I guess, a different crowd than I was expecting. I guess in a good way. I was anticipating that people attending the conference would be more heavily weighted towards the knowledgeable, experienced side, and there were a decent number of people who fit in that category. There were developers and people famous in the Mac community who were there, but also there were a decent number of people who had never even heard of some of the tools that I was talking about during my talk. So I wasn't ready for that disparity. There were a lot of people there. The average age was probably a little bit older than I was anticipating as well. So the learning experience I created and the pacing and the supports I put in place, I don't think the avatar or the learner that I had in my mind when I was making my presentation was correct. I could have asked, should have, if I was doing this professionally, if I was doing it from, in my day job, I ask all kinds of questions about the learners, but here, I don't know why, I just assumed who I'd be talking to. So that's an area to learn. Now that I've been there, now that I know, I would make a different presentation. So I'm excited to learn that and to present again next year. I'm going to submit a presentation next year with what I've learned, but it was a lot of fun. So let me also say that something else that this process solidified for me, this whole live streaming and all that solidified for me, was that I really like to tinker and come back, circle back to my learning materials a lot. I knew that beforehand, but I was thinking like, hey, I'll do all this stuff and I'll live stream this process and I'll just chunk it all up into these hours of time. And that's what I did for all the stuff that you saw. I didn't do any work in between those sessions that I didn't already talk about. I did build the website. Like I took time to build that website offline because it was a lot of like looking up links and stuff like that, which I didn't think would be as interesting. But after my last live stream on Thursday, and when I got to the conference and I started to realize that, hey, this situation's a little bit different than I thought it was going to be, I just kept tweaking and iterating because I didn't speak until Sunday. So I probably spent another 2 hours working on the presentation, either or at the conference, in the evening in my room or something like that. So let me walk you through what I ended up presenting, and then I'll talk about the feedback that I got and what I'll change and what some ideas I might have for next year, what topics I might do for next year. So let's come into Keynote here. And Keynote was a lot of fun to work with. I haven't been in Keynote in a very long time. Like I said before, I used it in my student teaching days. So I haven't made a presentation in Keynote since 2009. So it's been almost more than 15 years since I've been in here, and I could feel the stuff that I remember. I remember some of the parts, and obviously it's been updated since then, but I remember the workflow, and I had fun making it. And I also had fun presenting with it because on my iPhone, one of the things that you can do with the Keynote app on your phone is there's a little button here that lets you create a remote, and it's right now it's paired with my laptop, which is not in this room, but so I was able to walk around this hall, this big room, and even 50, 75 feet away from my laptop, I could see my current slide, my next slide, and I was able to move through them and use my phone as a presentation remote, which I thought was kind of fun. And the audience, I think, appreciated that. They liked the idea of seeing some piece of Apple technology used in a way they've not seen or used before. So that was fun. The other thing that I did during the weekend was, the more people I talked to, just OmniFocus kept coming up. OmniFocus. So I did add a little, I added supports for OmniFocus to the presentation as well. I didn't really talk about it a lot during the presentation, but I updated the page on my site to have the OmniFocus actions you would want and an OmniFocus version of the task paper template. And I think my talk really resonated. My intro to the talk really resonated. I think that was a very strong opening for the presentation, because I talked about digital mise en place and cooking, and I talked about how my mom was a foods teacher and how I learned about the term mise en place because in the 90s, when she needed to use, how do you use a video clip in your class when you're before YouTube? You have your son wake up on Saturday morning and record stuff with a VCR off of Food Network. And I shared that, and that's how I learned this term mise en place from an episode of Alton Brown, his show Good Eats. So people liked that story, and I talked about how, if you plan and prepare things ahead of time in a kitchen, your kitchen ends up looking like this, versus if you don't, then it ends up looking like this. And this was actually an AI image, as you could probably tell, but I thought it was a pretty strong one, especially for a quick little gag to move through because I couldn't find a picture of a sloppy kitchen on Unsplash that I liked. But anyway, I ended up making this with Google Gemini, which I had never used for image generation before, and it worked pretty well. And then I talked about how I used this mise en place concept in my classroom. This is just an Unsplash photo, but making sure that everything was nice and organized, everything was in its place. That was something I did in my classroom. And then I wanted to, this is another Unsplash image. I wanted to start doing this with my digital life, and I talked about how this desk was kind of the vibe I was going for with my digital files, how I liked how this desk had everything in its place. This is not my desk, but how everything had its place and was easy to find and all that stuff. And I liked the calm serenity that you get from this picture, and I wanted my digital files to look like this, but on more than one occasion, my screen, my desktop, ends up looking like this after a presentation or after a project. And this was a picture I found on an Apple support forum. I image searched for messy Mac desktop, and this came up. And people really liked this. This was a funny gag for them. And then something I used a lot in this presentation, I think in a subtle but tasteful way, was the magic move animation. I'm going to try to play this and see if it comes through. I don't know if the live stream picked that up or if that just was a black screen, but the animation, the magic move was, I think, a nice way of connecting slide to slide and making it a more cinematic experience. And what the magic move does is it just finds the image, anything, object, image, whatever, from slide to slide, and it just does some keyframe animations to move an image from where it is on the first slide to a new place on the second slide. And so I found that best for this type of thing. I actually, if you can tell, the other image, the clean desktop, like this image, is actually behind this image on this slide, so that it magic moves in nicely and they kind of separate into two separate sides. But anyway, I liked having the juxtaposition of having like the old sloppy thing on the left, that's the starting point, and the goal is on the right, because I'm presenting in northern Illinois. I'm assuming I'm presenting to a group of native English speakers and readers, and the English language has like this left to right mindset, right? And that's how our video players, like player head, works and all that kind of stuff. We just culturally have this concept of like the beginning is on the left and the end is on the right. So I try to use that visual imagery in my presentations as well. So that's why the old stuff is on the left and the new stuff is on the right. I also added in this, it's funny, I use an app called Readwise, which helps me remember some of the stuff I've highlighted, like articles or entries from books and stuff like that. And this surfaced, I think on Saturday morning as part of my daily review. This quote from Merlin Mann came up, and I was like, holy crap, how did I not remember this and include this before? So this is obviously a quote from a prolific Apple-centric productivity person and podcaster. I think many people there at the presentation actually know Merlin personally, so it was I think another selling point in the presentation was to say, like, hey, this is all important. Like everything up to here, slides 1 through 9, was all about setting the stage of saying, of me connecting with the audience and with them, and trying to sell them on, like, hey, we can try to do this thing. We can think about digital infrastructure and getting your digital mise en place. We can think about this organization in a meaningful way, and it's probably going to matter. And so ending with this slide, I thought, was a good final point of emphasis in the first couple of slides. Then I went into MindNode, and if I'm being honest, this is where things started to fall apart a little bit, because people did come with iPads, which I somewhat anticipated. I assume most people will be coming with Macs, but and there's probably the majority, but there were definitely people who were working on an iPad-based workflow, which is fine because MindNode does come on the iPad, but kind of the workflow, the presentation, like the room. Pop back full screen for a second. Something that I thought was going to be happening during these talks was that I thought I was going to be an option for people to join. That's how all the conferences I've ever presented at have been, like you do like a breakout, or if you're doing a workshop, you're in a separate room somewhere, and like there are times people are going from room to room of their own volition and choosing a room to go watch a presentation or go participate in a workshop in. So I kind of thought that was going to be the case, but this was not. Everybody was watching one presentation at a time throughout the whole weekend, which I could have inferred by looking at the schedule. I should have realized that, but I don't know. That was just not what I was anticipating. So I didn't think to question my preconceived notion about it. So there were people who didn't understand how to use a mind map, which I kind of was like, I was thinking maybe they might not understand a couple keys strokes in MindNode if they've never used it before. But there were definitely people who had never used a mind map before and were having trouble installing it and didn't understand like how you could break things out. So I was walking around the room, doing the teacher stuff, talking to people and helping people during the breaks, during like the little work sessions that I would give them, like, hey, 5 minutes, why don't you go do this for 5 minutes, that type of thing. But I started to get a little nervous during this time. I was like, uh-oh. But I think I still had the room and I still had the people in the room. I did put up an extra slide, an extra little note, QR code to get people back to this page. I wanted to make sure that my handout, my resource that I made for everybody to use during the whole thing, I kept bringing that up and just making sure that was surfaced so people could access everything they needed. And then here was the prompt that I gave them, and I gave them like 60 or 90 seconds just to do it quietly and to think about what they would want what they need to work on, and then gave them some additional support here. And I asked them to share with the person next to them. I went through and like read this out loud or talked about this out loud to make sure that people heard it and got some more ideas. The whole point of this slide and this little conversation where I asked them to talk to somebody next to them for 30 seconds, and this slide to show my own map. The whole point was, I really hope that everybody has an idea to work with and pick something. And then the final option was, hey, if you're still coming up empty on all this stuff, you can pick attending MacStock for next year. And this is the idea that I had the whole time, was that attending MacStock for next year is going to be the nice backup copy, backup plan for everybody, the catch-all for anybody who doesn't have anything else. But I spent 4 slides here trying to get people to come up with their own idea first. I think it's more meaningful if they did it like that. And then we shifted over into, let's start doing something. Let's start talking about how do you do that project. So we jump back into MindNode, and I asked them to pick one of the ideas from their mind map and then let's start building that out with the tasks that are part of that project. So another screenshot from my node, and this is one I said I picked travel, and I built this one out. And then this was another magic move, and it did a nice subtle push in. And I wanted to cap the MacStock demo thing up there in the corner, but push this in so it filled up the whole screen. And I was telling them, take some time to break down whatever project that you've picked as much as you need to, as deep as you want to. And again, this is where I realized, again, by walking around, because I'm giving sections of time, like 2, 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes of time for people to work on this quietly by themselves. As I'm walking around, and I'm like, people are having trouble with how mind maps work. It's understandable if you've never used one before. It's a different paradigm. But again, I wasn't thinking, I didn't plan ahead of time, or didn't have an accurate perception of who I'd be talking to. Because in one row, I have people who develop their own apps, so they're fine. And then the row right in front of that person would be a person has everything in one box. It hasn't made separate mind nodes. They just have everything in one thing because they don't know how to use the tool. So I wasn't ready for that disparity of ability, but soldiered on. And this was another magic move where it kind of pushed over, and this revealed. And this whole treating the slides as like a camera, like continuity from like slide to slide, is something I got from a Nancy Duarte book, Slideology, I think is what that book was called. It's been a long time since I read it, but kind of treating slides as like just views on a big canvas, and what you see is like a camera moving around this big canvas I think is a compelling way to make a presentation. So I tried to use that trick a couple times here, and almost like a quasi-Prezi. If you remember Prezi back in the day, I was a big Prezi fan when I first started teaching. So kind of that idea of sliding around this canvas was what I was trying to go with, because I did think I needed to have from my impression of just meeting and talking to people, I decided I needed to have some visuals of what I was asking them to do. I think if you go back to episode 4 of this, I may have just had, let's break out into a mind node. I just may have had this slide, I think. So I did add some infrastructure based on what I observed on the first and second day of the conference, but not enough. I didn't fully understand the group I was presenting to, I guess. So we get down to this slide, and then so this is where we start really heavily relying on the site. So I keep bouncing people over to the site. I did make sure to have the URL at the top of every page right up here, and I did a screenshot of the page and the part of the page I wanted them to be working with. But this is where another pain point, I think, and I was a little bit on my heels after the slides. The mind map wasn't working. So I was questioning myself a little bit, but I'm like, all right, so let's jump into this task template. Here's the things version, here's the OmniFocus version. Pick whichever one you're working with, and you can copy and paste this over. You can add these actions. And the other thing that was troublesome was that, so I had my laptop, obviously, because I'm presenting from my laptop, but it was set up as an extended display with the conference display screens on the sides. So I couldn't work on my screen from my laptop, which I wasn't ready for. So I was like moving things over to the side and then trying to like look around the corner and like look at the slide, and I couldn't read the text on there. And so it struggled a little bit here, but I think people did. And this is where we started to depart. I think I had everybody together through the mind map. And I think people started dropping. They stayed. They didn't leave, and they weren't disrespectful or anything like that. But it was just like, I think taking a task paper template and moving it over a node, and you can break it off. So I took off the travel one, and I did this on screen so people could see it, but I detached travel and it became its own node, and I could just drag that separately. And then I made another node for files coming off of that, just like all these others are branched off, and then said, all right, so now let's make our different stuff that we need. So anyway, after they planned that out, we slid over to the site again, and I was like, all right, so now that you've planned out the folders that you need, here's how you can do it. Here's how you can make the shell script. And there was, kind of as expected based on everything else I've said, there was a pretty big gap in people's opinions about AI at this conference. There were some talks centered around how it's helpful and how you can use it, and then there were some people who were like, I'm not giving anything AI to anything, I'm not giving anything to AI, or that type of stuff. So I guessed there would be people in those two camps. So I did say, like, here's your DIY approach and here's an AI assisted approach, and I gave them a sample AI prompt and my shell script that I use so that they could make their own. And then I framed the last part as, like, we just cooked two parts of our meal. We have our files and our tasks, and then now we got to put them into Keyboard Maestro, and that's going to be kind of like how a chef would plate a meal and put it onto a plate and serve it. That's how you actually use it, is from the plate that the chef has put together, and that is going to be Keyboard Maestro. That's where we're going to do the plating of all of our work, so to speak. So I gave them a download of the Keyboard Maestro macro that I already created, and have the written directions here on how they could take their draft that has their task paper template in it, put it into Keyboard Maestro, how they could take their shell script and put it into Keyboard Maestro, and then run their macro and see all that stuff come together. And then I brought it back to the mise en place analogy from the beginning and tried to draw a connection between that mise en place, and instead of preventing a dirty kitchen, it prevents those dirty desktop, and it gives you this peaceful, zenful computer experience rather than the other one that we saw before. And then I finished it with a little quote from John Wooden. We're in the northern Midwest, so I assume basketball was going to resonate with the audience, and I think it did. But talked about how I think this applies to what we're doing here, and how these automations are not here to replace the work that they're doing, but they're just here to support and make it easier for people to do the human creative work type stuff. It's basically the same thing as everybody else was talking about with AI over the weekend. And then I shared this last slide with the three QR codes on it. One for the links to all my social stuff, one to a feedback form, and one just presentation I've given about, to a live audience about Keyboard Maestro on automations and all that stuff. So I want to know more. I want to get better, like that type of thing. And that's true. That I honestly feel that way, and that's why I took the time to share it, and that's why I asked for it. Even when I know that in the middle of the presentation, I was starting to lose people because it was more complicated. Again, I came in too high. I wasn't prepared appropriately for the audience I was presenting to. But even knowing that, I was like, all right, I know there's going to be some people who aren't going to be happy or aren't going to give me glowing reviews, but hey, let me know. And so I really emphasized this to the room, and I asked for their feedback multiple times. And I also answered questions, and some people were kind enough to share their feedback out loud during those question and answer sessions, which was informative. And and that was the first person who really told me that, hey, you lost me a while ago, was somebody who said it out loud on camera, during the conference. But I'm glad to have heard that message. And so I shared that, answered a bunch of questions. But that being said, the group was a very nice group of people. Several people came up, especially people who were more of that, like, on that developer side of the spectrum, the people who are really good with this stuff. They were very grateful that they got a presentation that was at their level. And they talked about how a lot of times a lot of the other presentations are not super appropriate for them. So they really appreciated having somebody come talk to them. And there were some people who I lost during the presentation, but who wanted to continue. So I talked to them for a little bit a while after the conference, or after the presentation, off on the side and stuff like that. So I thought it was, I am happy with the presentation I gave. I would give a different presentation to that room again. But so that's kind of how it worked. And so you could go back and check the tape from what I had on Thursday when I made those slides. Like, all right, here we go. This is the presentation I'm going to give. It's going to be very different than this presentation. The general theme and flow and all that stuff is all the same, but I kept working on it and iterating it over the weekend. And again, I'm happy with it, but there are ways to get better. So that being said, let me go ahead. What was most valuable? What was most challenging? Did you successfully create something? How confident are you in customizing the system for other projects? What was the pace? Were my instructions clear? Anything else I should know? So I'm not going to share the results from this one because people used names and stuff in some of their answers, which I don't want to share anybody's information there. But looking at the summary, even though I didn't feel great about the middle part of the presentation, and I know I lost some people, the 6 people still gave me a little bit higher than a 4, which I'm happy with. Again, I could have done better. I know I could have done better, and I know there's things I will improve for next time. So honestly, 4 is a little higher than I anticipated getting. It was a pretty equal split here, but the most valuable section to them was the project selection. So that's that part where I was doing the mind maps and having people think about their stuff. The macro assembly, which I'm surprised it was considered the most valuable by 2 of the people. They must be from that section of the presentation that are those more experienced and higher skilled people. And then there's equally all valuable. I did make a mistake with the most challenging and said they're equally all valuable. I should have changed this because I just duplicated this question to change the top. I didn't change the possible answers. So I'm assuming this means equally all challenging is what 3 people presented. And then the macro assembly was most challenging, and then the task templates was the most challenging. That's the one where I honestly feel like I did the worst, was converting the task templates part. Because that's where it was like that extra screen, and I was having trouble seeing the screen as being able to show, like, here's how the task paper templates work. And this one is disappointing. I'm not saying it's disappointing that they didn't do it. I'm disappointing that I didn't get them to do it. So I guess that means 5. Yeah, 5 people did not successfully create a working automation by the end. 1 person did, though I did have some people post on Mastodon, and other people reach out and say that they were able to create something. So maybe those people didn't respond to you, or maybe they just needed a little bit of extra time to finish. So maybe this question was assuming too much, like people would want to take more time to dig into and make stuff, personalize their stuff before the end of the talk. So maybe that's where that came from. But I mean, the resounding answer is that most people didn't finish. And then customizing, again, one person is 1, so that's always not great. What I would hope is, even if somebody hadn't finished it, I would hope they would feel confident in that they could do it. But somebody was not. And then we had a little bit more of a higher count over here with 4 people, 3 people saying they do feel like they can, 2 people at a 3. So those numbers are okay. The pace was just right, so I'm surprised. I mean, with everything else I just said, people thought the pace was just right. So, all right, that's good. And then I think this is the last question I'm going to share, because the other one is, anything else I should know. And again, some people identified their names, and I don't want to share that without explicit permission. So, were instructions clear and easy to follow? And yes, so it's always nice to hear that. 5 people said yes, they were. 1 person used that optional part and said some parts are very clear, others I skipped some key steps, which I think that's 100% valid. Again, I thought people were choosing to come to this presentation, so I assumed they would come in with some knowledge that I didn't build time in to the presentation to cover. So that is the presentation feedback. I'm very grateful for the people who did share that information, and that's stuff that I want to get better at. The whole reason I do this, the whole reason I paid money to fly out to Chicago and rent a car and a hotel room and all that stuff was I wanted to give a presentation. I want to talk to people. I want to share stuff with people. But I also want to do a good job at it. So a core, essential part of any presentation, any learning experience, honestly, I think anything that I do, but especially with learning, I think a core element is reflecting on your presentation and trying to make sure that you get better, right? You're expecting other people to come listen to you talk, which inherently kind of means that you're expecting people to be better or do better, to listen to you, to learn, to grow. I think if you're expecting your learners to do that, I think it's kind of incumbent on you to also do that. So, and in the broader picture of like the conference and stuff, obviously learning the other things that other people are talking about is helpful, and I did find some good stuff there, but also, like, again, just that reflection on what you do as an educator and trying to get better. It's easy just to say, like, oh, well, those kids or something. Kids these days, they just don't have the gumption that we used to have when I was my age. I worked with plenty of people who think like that. I find it to be kind of not a great way to operate your classroom or your learning experiences. Is just I think it's more important to learn yourself and grow. So that's what I did here. I'll stop talking about what I'm waxing philosophically about all that stuff. So one more thing I'd like to do is, with all that in mind, instead of waiting until next spring, go there, my note, there we go. Instead of waiting until next spring to come up with some ideas, MacStock 10 next year. So knowing what I know now, what would I want to do for the presentation? Like what talk would I want to give, understanding that I'm going to have everybody skill level. So this is just brainstorming some ideas, some thoughts on what I could do. First thing to do is to spell it right. And honestly, I still haven't figured out if it's a capital S or not. I think it's a lowercase s. Anyway. So there's three things I feel really confident in teaching people about when it comes to the Mac. First one's drafts, honestly, is my the area where I feel really confident, most confident in. And then there's Keyboard Maestro. And the third thing that I use a lot is Hazel. So with drafts, I could do like a I could do like a 101 class. I feel like that's kind of boring. Maybe instead I could do like a... What if I did like a challenge or like a ladder? I could do like... Oops. So, come on. So what I mean by that is, like, what if so maybe I could do like I could come up with 10 things you can do in drafts, but I would make them like increasingly difficult or increasingly complicated. Because I definitely have a wide swath of things. I use drafts a ton. I was on a podcast a year or two ago, and somebody said that they think that one of the hosts said that they think I do more with drafts than anybody else on the planet, which I think was just a joke. But I am, like, drafts is my number one spot to do stuff in. So maybe I could do something with that, like, because I don't want to lose those people on the right side of the scale, like the people who were really happy that I gave an advanced talk. But I don't want to lose the people who... One of my highest performing videos on YouTube is 5 one-step keyboard Maestro macros. And it's an embarrassing video because I had like 30 subscribers at the time when I made that video, and I had just been a guest on Learn OmniFocus, and I had just been a guest on that podcast I just mentioned before, the Smarter podcast. So I talked for a little while about that first at the beginning, and then it was a unscripted video. One of my friends had commented that she watches my videos, but she knows kind of like, she knows what the beats are going to be, like what the video is going to look like. So she challenged me, like, well, why don't you just try something in like unscripted video? Why don't you just try to go in for it? And my comments all into this video, I avoid this video like the plague, because people always like to tell me that, I shouldn't talk so much at the beginning, or, it wasn't a very good video and all this stuff. But I don't know if it just gets a lot of engagement and that's why the algorithm drives it, or the video subject. I don't know what causes it, but it's one of my best performing videos, but it bugs me because it's not a very good video. So, or it doesn't, I'm not proud of that one like I am other ones. So anyway, maybe I could do something like that with Keyboard Maestro. Maybe I could still share some cool stuff with one-step macros, but I could introduce people to the Keyboard Maestro, because a surprising number of people at the conference had never used Keyboard Maestro or drafts. And I didn't even talk about Hazel, but nobody had ever mentioned Hazel the whole time I was there. So, you know what, like a Hazel 101 might actually be useful, because I think, well, honestly, I think all three of these could be you know what? So when I was a teacher, my buddy and we were co-teachers, and we were both tech people, and our students weren't, but we wanted them to be, but we didn't have time in class to do it. So we would do these like tech sessions, is what we called them. And it was stuff that were like, if kids knew how to use a DSLR camera, it would really make their projects cooler and more interesting. But we can't take time in class to teach them like how to use a slow shutter or stuff like that. So we did these like little 60-minute like after school sessions, optional sessions. The kids showed up and we did all kinds of fun stuff, and kids really liked it. I wonder, so tech sessions is what we called them. I'd have to talk to Mike, the organizer of the conference, but what if we did like, let me take these 101s out of here. What if we did something like, and this is me thinking like a teacher trying to like take on too much probably, or to make there be too many things, but so it's a 3-day conference, and it starts at like 9 a.m. and I'm coming from the East Coast, so I'm up at 6 and we're up at 5 when I was over there, and all that. Like 8:30. Let's do 30 minutes. Let's do like a drafts boot camp or drafts 101 or a study hall for drafts that people could come if they were interested in. But it would be specifically targeting like, here are people who like, you're installing the app, and like here's a couple things to get you started with drafts, you know, and then here's a couple things to get you started with Keyboard Maestro and Hazel. Maybe that could be cool. And then that would give me the freedom to do something more advanced with these other tools. And this might just be, I'm just using 10 Hazel rules. I don't know, 5. So that's what I had before, 5 keyboard. I'd have to think more about these other ones, but these are the areas I would be most comfortable in probably, as of right now. Areas I would be most comfortable sharing that I think would be Mac-centric, you know, to be able to show to this conference. One of these 3 technologies would be the one I'd want to present about. Probably in this order of preference. I'll have to spitball some more ideas here, because I have some stuff like in drafts. I have a rule, or an action, a drafts action that's way over the top, but I'm really proud of it. And it's for something I don't even really get to use it ever, but so my son's schedule at school, he has he had this like real complicated schedule this year with different teachers on different days and like all kinds of stuff. So like if he was going to be absent, if we were going to go on a trip and he was going to be absent for a couple of days, I didn't remember who he was going to have on a particular day, whether this would be the day where he would have, chorus or this was his day where he was in this person's math class or whatever. So I made a Hazel rule. I keep saying Hazel rule. I made a drafts action that had like a JavaScript library with his schedule in it, and then it looks up like when I'm running the action, and it knows at a certain time of the day, like after 4 p.m., if I run the action, it actually looks at tomorrow's date and figures out who his teachers are and like sends an email to them, like all this kind of stuff. But it's really cool, and I think it's definitely like that would be number 9 or 10 on my drafts ladder of 10 things you can do in drafts. But I think I have stuff there that I could run the gamut of people. Like I could give a presentation where everybody would walk away with something with that one. And I could do that with Keyboard Maestro too. I have a video about 5 one-step Keyboard Maestro macros, and I have the presentation I gave this year was honestly this is a convoluted Keyboard Maestro macro workflow. So I could definitely do a similar ladder of 10 things you can do in draft. I need to come up with a better term than that. Here we go. In Hazel. I don't know. This ladder thing's might not be a good idea. Just my first idea. I have a year before I don't know, 6 or 9 months before I'd have to submit anything. But at first stop, off of today, what I need is something, I think Apple-centered flow like I just showed. Huh. All right. Well, I mean, that brings us to an hour. I don't know. If you don't count traveling to the conference and being at the conference and stuff like that, if you just total up the work that I did, even though I did some of it at the conference, you include that. If you total up all the work I did for this presentation, I'm going to guess it's in the... I wouldn't be surprised if it's 10 hours. And there's definitely more. There's like thinking time that gets applied to that as well. And it's that much time partially because I think that you need to spend a lot of time when you're giving a talk, when you're thinking about this stuff. It's worth the time and effort. It's even if you're an expert in something, thinking through how you're going to give that presentation and all the things that you need to support that presentation, I think is really... It's worth it. You need to spend that time on it. Other people could spend less time than that, but I don't feel like I spent too much. I feel like this is an appropriate amount of time for me and how I do things and how I work on things. That this felt good. I'm happy with the presentation. I could do better next time, and I think it was a lot of fun. So if you are an Apple enthusiast, if you're interested in a fun, low-key weekend with other people who are interested in Mac stuff, MacStock was a lot of fun. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm glad I went, and I'm looking forward to going next time. My wife might not be super excited about me going next time because I did get to try on a Vision Pro one evening. They had one of the little social gatherings at the conference was a bunch of Vision Pro users were letting other people try their Vision Pros, and I thought it was just hype. Like I thought it was I didn't trust what some of the people were saying, And I was doing this, I took my glasses off. So I did this, partially vision impaired, because I didn't have any corrective lenses in my Vision Pro that I tried on. Holy crap. It was impressive. So if I spend $4,000 on a Vision Pro, my wife might not approve the trip next year, because she'll be afraid of what I come back with next time. But it was a lot of fun, and I think it was something that you should think about if you're interested in attending the conference. Keep an eye out on the MacStock website for next year's dates and all that stuff. In the meantime, this is my last live stream for a while, I think. I have been building up kind of a list of videos that I want to make for the channel. So I'll be jumping back into the standard content, the Mac automation and productivity type stuff here, probably in 2 weeks is when I'll work on the next video, because I will be out of town shortly. And when I come back, I'll be getting back on to the YouTube content creation stuff. So if you're interested in that type of thing, make sure that you subscribe. I also have a couple blog posts in my mind, including one from MacStock that I want to put together. So also check out the blog at themikeburke.com. And otherwise, thanks for watching today. Thanks for following along. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Otherwise, have a great day. I'll see you next time.